Hello everybody, I am Dr. Richa Dwivedi from ZenOnco.io and Love Heals Cancer. Today's session is about creating awareness around cancer. Let me first introduce you to ZenOnco.io and Love Heals Cancer. We guide cancer patients in their journey with cancer. We aim to improve the quality of life of cancer patients through an integrative oncology approach that includes both medical and complementary treatments. We provide end to end care to cancer patients and help in their counseling sessions, medical cannabis, anti cancer diet, Ayurveda, pain and palliative care. For today's session, we're joined by Dr. Richa Bansal. Hello, ma'am. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, Dr. Richa, it's a great pleasure to be here.
Let me take this opportunity to introduce Dr. Richa Bansal. She completed her MBBS from Padma Shri Dr. D.Y. Patil Medical College, Nerul, and her MS from Lokmanya Tilak Medical College and Hospital. She further pursued her doctoral from the prestigious Tata Memorial Hospital, Mumbai. She is considered to be a key opinion leader in her field among the medical community. Her surgical expertise is performing all the supra-major gynecological oncological procedures, including open, laparoscopic, and robotic surgeries for gynecological cancers. So once again, ma'am, thank you for joining us and taking time out from your busy schedule. Is there anything you would want to say before we begin with the Q&A session?
So I just want to, introduce myself in probably more simpler language. So I treat cancers of the women, of the reproductive organ, basically cancer of the ovary, cancer of the uterus, which is the womb, mouth of the uterus, cervix, and basically the all the cancers of the genital organs. And I have special interest in treating gynec cancers, especially in young women, because we all can understand that cancer surgery for gynec cancers or genital organs means removal of your uterus, removal of the ovaries, and so on. So the treatment decisions have to be carefully weighed so that we can give our young women who are dealing with cancer a good oncological outcome, that is good survival from their cancer, as well as we want to weigh our decisions so that we can also preserve their childbearing potential as far as possible. So in cases who are suitable for organ preserving surgery, where we can preserve a part of ovary, where we can preserve uterus without compromising their survival from cancer, is what is close to my heart, and this is what is my expertise. So we do take these decisions, especially for young women, very carefully, and this is what is my special interest. And also, I conduct a lot of awareness sessions for prevention of cancer and spreading awareness about cancer and its common symptoms and how we can prevent it among women. Uh, I think, yes, so further we'll speak as required. You
All
can go ahead.
all right. So I think today's session is going to be really informative for all the women out there. So, ma'am, shall we begin with the Q&A session? So, ma'am, what are some common gynecological cancers that you come across in young women in India?
Traditionally, we all think, and we were taught also that cancer is mainly a problem of the older women. So as the age of the woman increases, she's more predisposed to develop cancer, and usually does not occur in the younger women. Younger women are kind of safe from cancer, but it's complete change that we are seeing in our clinical practice. These days, we are seeing that a lot of cancers are happening in younger women as well. And many of these are because of our lifestyle changes and our habits. For example, cancer of the uterus or the cancer of the womb is conventionally thought to be a cancer of the old women, but these days we are seeing a lot of young women also being diagnosed with these cancer of the uterus. And mainly the reason is the increasing incidence of obesity, increasing incidence of obesity in young women, PCOS, polycystic ovarian disease. Many of you all must have heard of it. It's a common gynec problem. Then infertility, delaying first childbirth beyond 35 years of age because of our career choices. Then having lesser number of children, because having more number of children and breastfeeding your child for at least 6 months is protective against many cancers like cancer of the uterus and cancer of the ovary. So because of these changes in our social and cultural practices, we are seeing even these cancers are being diagnosed in younger women as well. So yes, cancer of the uterus, as I just said, is being diagnosed in more younger women. Cancer of the ovary is being diagnosed, and there are many cancers which happen in younger women per se. For example, germ cell tumors of the ovary, which is a different variety of cancer ovary, which typically occurs in younger women. Then cervical cancer normally affects women of childbearing age, with peak incidence in the late third decade and the fourth decade. Then many of the cancer ovary, like I said, are being diagnosed in younger women, and so on.
Okay. So, ma'am, what are some early signs and symptoms that women need to watch out for?
So, early signs and symptoms for especially for gynec cancers, I would say, is any abnormal vaginal bleeding, any abnormal change in your regular periods, which was any change in the routine of your periods, recent onset change with either the periods have become heavy, there is more blood loss, or they're coming more frequently, or there is any bleeding in between normal periods, that periods are okay, but in between there is a lot of spotting when it shouldn't be there. Then any vaginal discharge, any sort of pain in the lower abdominal area, any change in the bowel habit, like recent onset constipation, recent onset loose motions, or many a times these patients also have constipation alternating with loose motions. And in fact, many of these symptoms are easily attributable to many other change in the routine or something, like symptom of constipation could be attributed to some eating change in the eating habits, or loose motion could be attributed to some outside food or something. So we always find some reasons for these symptoms, but yes, if these symptoms have been persistent and not relieving over time, and in fact the severity of these symptoms have been increasing over a period of time, and yes, a significant change from your routine, then definitely we should not ignore it, and we should get oneself investigated. So also weight loss, unexpected weight loss could be a sign of underlying malignancy of any part of the body. Then loss of appetite could be a major symptom. For breast cancer, any feeling of a lump or pain in the breast, or any change in the appearance of the breast or the nipple are the signs and symptoms which one should not ignore.
All right. So I think any abnormal symptoms have to be observed and reported. But, ma'am, I
Yes.
think there are a lot of screening tests that are available for these cancers. I mean, except for the pap smear, which is usually done in cervical cancer cases. So, I mean, what are some other self-examinations or examinations that can be done for, detection of these cancers at an earlier stage?
Yes. So, cervical cancer, that is the cancer of the mouth of the uterus or mouth of the womb, is the most important cancer that can be prevented by these screening tests. And in fact, it is the second most common cancer that affects the women of our country after breast cancer. So the screening for cervical cancer is most well established and most recommended by all the international societies. And there are very robust recommendations that women must undergo screening for cervical cancer between 35 to 65 years of age with the help of a pap smear and an HPV test. So there are two tests. Normally, both the tests are available, especially in the metropolitan cities. And if, of course, HPV test is not available, then pap smear itself is also good. So pap smear, if one is doing only pap smear, then that should be done every 3 years. And if one is doing pap smear along with an HPV test, because HPV test gives us additional information, and if both the tests are negative, then it gives us more reassurance that definitely everything is all right from that point of concern. So the time period between two tests can be extended from 3 years to 5 years. So basically, if one is doing both pap smear and HPV test, then the screening interval becomes 5 years. So this is about screening for cervical cancer. Then definitely we recommend screening for breast cancer with the help of a yearly mammogram after 48 to 50 years of age. And even more important is self-examination of the breast, which is recommended once you're above 30 years of age. And a lot of YouTube videos and a lot of information is available on net also about how to conduct a proper self breast examination. And we call this as breast aware. Every girl beyond 30 years of age should be self breast aware, and she should be doing her self breast examination once in a month. We normally recommend it to do after the completion of periods, probably 2 to 3 days after your periods have stopped, and while at the time of taking the shower. So first is inspection. That is, one must inspect whether both the breasts are looking same, or is there any change in the appearance of one of the breast or one of the nipple. And then is the feeling part, the palpation part. Normally it should be done with the flat of the hand so that it is not painful. And all the quadrants of the breast should be examined along with the armpit region, axillary region. And once someone gets into this habit of doing this self breast examination every month, they tend to master the technique of this thing, examination, and also they become aware of the normal breast feel. So any change in the feel or any lump, that can be diagnosed much earlier as compared to the lump being diagnosed when it becomes symptomatic. So other thing is, now if we talk about cancer of the uterus, there is no screening test that is recommended for all the women, but what we can recommend is that any abnormal bleeding, especially after the age of 40 years, should not be ignored. If your periods are heavy, or if they are more frequent, or if there is spotting in between periods, then any such problem, any such complaint should not be ignored, and a doctor should be consulted. Other thing is that many a times women go to their doctors and they just want some medication to decrease the blood flow, and or some hormonal medicine without actually undergoing proper evaluation to try to find out what is the cause of such abnormal bleeding. So we recommend that a proper biopsy from the uterine cavity should be done if there is any such abnormal symptom, and especially if there is ultrasound which is showing some endometrial thickening. These important evaluations should not be missed. And also, even more significant is post-menopausal bleeding. So any bleeding in a woman who has already achieved her menopause is abnormal. So, many a times the women think that, okay, menopause has happened, and then they start bleeding after 1 or 2 years or even 3 years. So many a times they don't, convey to their family members, or, they just keep ignoring their symptoms for 6 months, even 1 year, even 2 years. And when they present to the doctor, the problem is already advanced. So we do not want that to happen. This is the message that I want to give, that any abnormal bleeding, especially in postmenopausal women, or even at an earlier stage, should not be ignored. Other thing that I would want to point out here, though, I mean, I can go on and on talking about these things. Discussing period problems, discussing these menstrual problems, or so-called women problems, is a big taboo in our society, not just in rural areas, but also in most advanced and educated and rich families. So, the old lady does not feel comfortable talking to this about to her son or daughter-in-law. And we do face this problem day in and day out in our OPDs. So, they feel very uncomfortable in telling somebody that at this stage they're getting periods. They perceive it as that way, that at 60 years and 60 plus also I'm getting my periods. How do I tell this to anybody? So yes, do not ignore about these symptoms. And if you have your old mother at home, in some way you should make her comfortable, so that if at all she has any problem, she should come out with it. So about ovarian cancer, again, the symptoms are generally vague, and there is no screening test that is recommended to be done in the entire population, but just awareness of these symptoms, that any abnormal pain in the abdomen, or constipation, loose motions, loss of appetite, abdominal fullness. So these things, especially if they are persistent or even progressing over a period of time rather than getting relief, then one should immediately consult the doctor. Any soreness, or any boil or something which is developing on the external genitalia part, should not be ignored. There also we see many times that women try to self-medicate. They'll keep applying some oil or something to that area without consulting the doctor. Many a times even we see that general practitioners, they, without even examining the woman, that what it is, any lesion or any thing on the external genitalia is so evident, you don't even need to do any test for it. But many a times we see that these women are being prescribed ointments after ointments without even trying to examine her once. And they present only when the lesion does not respond to all those treatment, and becomes bigger and bigger in size. So this is what I think we can do to be more aware about these things, and try to not ignore these symptoms, and consult a proper doctor for
Right.
these.
So I think women need to watch out, I mean, and look for any abnormal changes that's happening in their body. And
Yes.
also, like you spoke about cervical cancer, I think cervical cancer also had these vaccines which had come out. I mean, how effective are these vaccines in prevention of cervical cancer at a later stage?
So you have brought out this very important point. So, see, cervical cancer, again, I will say that it is the second most common cancer in our women. And if I will present the actual statistics for our country, they're actually very scary. They say that a woman dies of cervical cancer every 8 minutes. And every day in our country, at least 350 women are dying only of cervical cancer. So this is what is the enormity of the situation in our country, and there is no way that we can ignore or not know about this problem of cervical cancer. Now, cervical cancer, the main cause is genital infection with a virus, which is called human papilloma virus. This is a sexually transmitted infection. Whenever a couple start their sexual debut, in the next 6 months to 1 year, 90% of the couples will develop infection with this human papilloma virus in their genital organs. But again, it's a very self-limiting infection. 90% of these couples over next 6 months to 1 year will clear this infection from the genital areas. But in few 5 to 10% of women in whom this HPV infection has remained persistent because her inherent body's immunity has not been able to clear the infection from the genital area, it is in these 5 to 10% of women that HPV infection can progress to the development of cervical precancer and then cervical cancer. So this was to tell you that the main problem behind cervical cancer is a genital tract infection with a human papilloma virus. Now, against this virus, like we have vaccines against many other viruses, we have vaccine which are called HPV vaccine. Two sort of brands are available, Cervarix and Gardasil. So, the safety and the efficacy, the effectiveness of these vaccines in preventing cervical cancer has been proved worldwide. And there is robust scientific data which is stating that these vaccines are absolutely safe and they are very, very effective in preventing the development of cervical cancer. Now, what is the ideal age for giving these HPV vaccines? It is between 10 to 15 years of age. So young girls between 10 to 15 years of age is the ideal age at which these HPV vaccines are given. And why is it so? Because this is the time when definitely they are not exposed to any sexual activity. So because we want to give the infection before they are exposed to the culprit, before they're exposed to the HPV infection. And second reason is, like other vaccines, when they're given at a younger age, the immunogenicity, the immune response which the body develops is much higher. So the ideal age is between 10 to 15 years of age. Though if a girl has missed that window, and if she has not received the vaccine between 10 to 15 years of age, she can be vaccinated till any time before she gets married. Okay, so in the studies, women up to 26 years of age have been vaccinated, though as the age advances at which the vaccine is given, the efficacy may become slightly less. But nevertheless, we can still vaccinate young women before their marriage. So this was the ideal age. And in fact, I would also state that many of the developing countries have been able to eradicate this problem of cervical cancer, which is such a huge problem in our country. Many of the Western countries have been able to eradicate the problem of cervical cancer with the help of two things. One is vaccine, with the help of HPV vaccine, because they have very robust HPV vaccination programs, which are incorporated in their national immunization program. So one is HPV vaccine and second is screening. At the moment, both are recommended. It is not that if a girl has received HPV vaccination, she is not recommended to undergo cervical screening when she reaches 35 years of age. So at the moment, the recommendation is that we should vaccinate also and she should undergo cervical cancer screening also. Because it has been demonstrated in large public studies that when we offer both vaccination also and screening also, the impact that it has on decreasing the incidence of cervical cancers and deaths is maximum. So this was about cervical vaccines. These vaccines are not freely, but easily available in all the major hospital pharmacies. And, you can ask your pediatrician to give it to them or your gynac to give it to them.
But is there enough awareness around these vaccines? Because I think 10 years down, I mean, I was not aware about these vaccines 10 years back. So, I mean, is there awareness created around them now?
That is what we are doing. We are conducting a lot of community programs for creating this awareness. A lot of hospitals who offer free health checks and all. They do inform the people who visit these hospitals about these HPV vaccines. And we are progressing in this field, but not really. The awareness, as you rightly said, is still very, very low. So all we can do it is use various social media and spread awareness about this. The logistic issues are that these are available probably in cities but not everywhere. The third problem is the cost of the vaccine. Cervarix needs 2 doses of vaccine. The cost of each dose being between 2,500 to 3,000. And Gardasil, with both are equally effective. Nothing really to choose between them. Whichever is available can be taken. Gardasil requires 3 doses to be given. First the initial shot and then two boosters. And the cost is around the same. So a lot of factors are there. In fact, in India, the state of Punjab and the state of Sikkim had introduced these vaccines as a part of school health programs, so that all the school girls were vaccinated at the appropriate age, and they did see a lot of reduction in the development of cervical precancers in these girls. So yes, the work is going on, but a lot of initiatives by WHO and international societies. But yes, everybody has to do their own bit in this regard, I think.
Hopefully from today's video, I mean, viewers would become more aware about this. So ma'am, moving on to the next question, how important are family histories and genetics when it comes to gynecological cancers?
Yes, very important topic. Now, family history is very important for a lot of common cancers. Cancer of the ovary, cancer of the breast are hereditary. They can be hereditary. Almost 15 to 20% of all ovarian cancers and about 10% of all breast cancers can be hereditary. Hereditary means that these cancers are caused by the genes which can be transmitted from one generation to other. So from parents, these can be transmitted to siblings and then so on. And that is why when we ask a lady with ovarian cancer, many a times they come up with the family history of a close relative like her aunt, real Mausi, or her daughter, or her own mother, giving history of breast cancer and ovarian cancer. So I would say any lady who comes with any symptom or finding which could be suggestive of gynec cancer, we do elicit a detailed family history, both from her parents' sides, both from her father and from her mother's side. Because like I said, cancer of the ovary, cancer of the breast, even cancer of the uterus can be hereditary. So these are called hereditary cancer syndromes. And the affected individual, can be suffering from not just one type of malignancy, but few others also. And the good part is that if we are able to diagnose that this lady belongs to a hereditary cancer family, then we do have certain interventions. First thing is that we test the other close family members, that is her daughters, her son, her sister, her mother, that if they are also carrying this gene which is responsible for the development of malignancy, and the carriers, that is the close relatives who have not yet developed the disease, but who are carrying the gene, the culprit gene, they can be offered certain interventions depending upon the cancer to which they are predisposed. They can be offered certain kind of interventions so that the risk of developing cancer in them can be decreased, can be minimized. Like suppose if I have a patient in whom who's having cancer ovary, and in whom because of history or because of the characteristic of the tumor, we suspected that she could be belonging to this hereditary cancer family. We do this germline testing. It's a blood test which can be done. A lot of labs are there which do this test, and we test her close relatives also. So we can offer them certain interventions, prophylactic removal of both ovaries after she has completed her family at around 35 to 37 years of age, which decreases her risk of development of ovarian cancer by almost 95%. Similarly, we can offer some hormonal medications, or we can also do prophylactic mastectomies, removal of the breast tissue, to prevent the development of breast cancer. Cancer of the uterus belongs to the hereditary cancer syndrome, which is called Lynch syndrome. And these women are at a higher risk of developing cancer of the uterus, as well as cancer of the large intestine, and also cancer of the urinary tract, and many others. But these two are the most common. So whenever, the characteristics of these cancers in these individuals is that they tend to occur at a more younger age as compared to the general population risk. Like I said, cancer of the uterus more commonly occurs in postmenopausal women after 50 or 60 years of age. Then in women who are having these hereditary cancers, it may develop in her late 30s, in her 40s, so at least 10 to 15 years younger. And also there may be other, of course, family members who could have been suffering from a similar malignancy, either cancer of the uterus and cancer of the colon. So in these individuals also, we can do certain interventions, or we can screen them more frequently as compared to the general population. So we can screen them for, if she has already developed cancer of the uterus, we can screen them for cancer of the large intestine with the help of colonoscopy, so that any malignancy, if it is developing, it can be diagnosed at a much earlier stage. So yes, there are a lot of criteria that we have to do these genetic testing, and we do this genetic testing whenever it is appropriate, in whichever patient it is appropriate. And a lot of advances are there in the medical field so as to prevent these cancers in the susceptible close family members.
So ma'am, can you help us understand why women should seek treatment from a gynecological oncologist rather than their regular gynac?
First of all, I will tell you that the training in a particular field is very important. Gynec oncologists, they've been trained in the subject. They understand the physiology and the pathology of the cancer, why it developed, and what should be the treatment, where is it at risk of spreading, and what should be the adjunct treatment, that is further treatment after the surgery or something. So, and other thing is that cancer surgery, in cancer surgery, how is it different from a routine surgery is, in cancer surgery, we just don't have to remove the organ which is involved, but we also have to remove the organs to which the cancer is at risk of spreading. So this is how it is different from the normal surgery. So suppose if there is any benign condition that is involving the uterus, we know that just removal of the uterus will help the problem. Whatever the symptoms were there, we just have to remove the uterus and the symptoms will be sorted. But at the same time, if there is a malignancy of the uterus, we know that the basic nature of cancer is that it will not sit quietly in one place. It will tend to spread in the surrounding tissues, and also it will tend to spread to the other organs. This is what is the basic nature of cancer and why we are scared of it. This is the main reason. So whenever we are doing a surgery for cancer of an organ, be it any organ of the body, cancer surgery means we have to remove the organ which is involved, and also we have to remove the other structures which are at risk of spread from the cancer, and only then will we come to know whether the spread is there or not. Many a times, if there is obvious involvement of other structures, then definitely our imaging will help. But if grossly there is no spread, so we have to remove the other organs like lymph nodes or the surrounding tissues. Suppose if it is a cancer of the ovary, then omentum and many other things where the organs which are at risk of spread of cancer. So only then we will be able to stage the cancer, and we will be able to know how far it has spread, and which will help us in deciding what should be the further treatment after surgery. So this was in short. Now coming to cancer, for example, cancer of the ovary. The cancer of the ovary is unique in that it requires a major cytoreductive surgery for all the tumor to be removed. What is the cytoreductive surgery? Cytoreductive surgery means removal of the uterus, both the ovaries, which are cancerous, also removal of the omentum, which is a fat curtain in the abdomen, and also we have to remove all the disease which is there in the abdomen. If the disease is involving the peritoneum, the lining of the abdomen, all that has to be removed. And if there are lymph nodes involvement, then all those have to be removed. So basically, the aim of any surgery, especially for cancer ovary and for that matter any cancer, is that we should be able to remove all the tumor that is visible to the gross eyes, and we should not be leaving any tumor behind in the abdomen. This is because one's survival from cancer is directly proportional to how much the tumor has been removed. If we are leaving behind any tumor in the body after surgery, it affects the survival from the cancer in an adverse manner. So the aim is to clear all the tumor that is seen in the abdomen after any cancer surgery, especially cancer of the ovary. So, and there is a lot of scientific data. There are trials which have said that when a gynec oncologist or a gynec oncosurgeon does the surgery for cancer ovary, the survival is much better because the number of patients who are achieving this resection of complete tumor from the abdomen is much higher. One's chances of achieving complete removal of the tumor from the abdomen is much higher if the surgery is being done by an oncologist as to being done by a gynecologist. So this is why, the survival is better. The survival has been found to be better if the treatment is being received by a oncosurgeon as compared to general surgeon or general gynecologist. Similarly, we being gynec oncologists, we are trained in minimal access surgeries for cancer of the uterus. So same surgery which we are doing by open route, that is removal of the uterus, ovaries, also extensive lymph node dissections that are required for treatment of cancer of the uterus. We have been trained to do these surgeries by minimal access route as well, by laparoscopically and by robotically. So this again gives us an edge over the general surgeons, and so that we can give our patients the benefit for minimal access surgery also, keyhole surgery also, and without compromising their oncological outcome. So the patient is getting the benefit of keyhole surgery without having any hamperment of the survival. So this is why treatment from a gynec oncologist is always uh, helpful, and it is definitely going to improve the survival from cancer. Again, there are many rare malignancies, which only a dedicated person who is treating only malignancies would have seen. There are many rare case scenarios, rare presentations, rare tumors involving the uterus, ovary, because during our training we have worked at tertiary referral centers, like I've worked in Tata Memorial Hospital for 6 years. So there we have seen all kind of presentations, all kind of tumors. The academic training was equally important. So it is just the way we are trained. As a part of training, we have been exposed to treating all these cancers with all the varied case scenarios, and that is why definitely it is always better to take treatment from an expert rather than a generalist.
All right. Okay. So, ma'am, before I think we conclude this session, my last question for today would be: what are some common myths that women who come to you have around gynecological cancers?
Lot of myths. First and foremost, I think there are a lot of myths surrounding menstruation, and many religious beliefs, many hygiene related beliefs, a lot of things. I think we should do away with all those practices. I mean, first and foremost, we require a lot of awareness and counseling regarding that. Only then, discussing these problems in families will become a norm, and any woman who is suffering from these symptoms, she will be able to come up and discuss these problems, and probably seek the help earlier. So first is this. Then sometimes, many a times we have seen in families who are dealing with cancer in the mother, suppose. Many of them, they come to me and tell that they're finding it difficult to find a match for the daughter. If the mother has been diagnosed with cervical cancer, now cervical cancer is not at all hereditary. So we have seen a lot of families who come to us that doctor, I've been cured from the cancer, but there is so much stigma around it, being a cancer survivor, and they find it difficult to find a match for the daughter. So I think this is a big social issue, and I think we should get our medical facts right. We should consult somebody before thinking or having these kind of mentalities. Other things. Other myths are around, yes, other significant problem is that cancer is incurable, that once somebody is diagnosed with cancer, then definitely nobody can save, and he or she is going to die in few days or few months. So why to treat? And we have even heard some people saying that a treatment will worsen the problems, treatment will worsen the misery of the patient. So one thing is that we have to work towards creating more awareness, so that we are able to diagnose more and more cancers at an earlier stage, where the treatment protocols are easy. We can definitely guarantee higher cure rates as compared to women coming to us with already advanced cancers, where the treatment protocols are more complicated, and then obviously cure cannot be guaranteed. But still, overall, on this platform, I would like to convey to everyone that a lot of advancements have happened in the medical field, in the field of oncosurgery, in the field of chemotherapy medicines, in the field of radiation facilities, also in the field of diagnostics, and definitely we cannot say that all cancers are incurable and they should not be treated. So definitely the best way is to consult an expert, take their help, and and then go by what they say, and rather than just believing in some vague sayings. So definitely, cancer is not incurable. We, a lot of cancers are treatable. Um, that's all I can think of about myths.
All right, ma'am. So I think this was like a very informative session. I mean, I had so many doubts which got cleared today. So I'm sure many of the viewers would have their doubts cleared once they watch this video. So once again, I would like to thank you for joining us today, for clearing so many doubts and creating this awareness around vaccines and gynecological cancers. It was a pleasure talking to you today.
Here, and I hope that it would reach to many people, and it would be useful to many people.
Yes, ma'am, definitely. Thank you so much, ma'am.